Welcome to the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. Now, here's your hosts, B. Cox and the crew.
Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. It's a perspective on the classics from a fresh point of view. We appreciate you for taking your time and lending your ears to our perspective. You could be anywhere listening to anything, but you're right here with us, so we thank you. With you today is yours truly, B. Cox, and with me, I have part of the crew, my boy J.O., Jason Owens, here with us to help talk about the classics here that we have today. Our motto for the Vault Classic Music Reviews is hashtag Open the Vault, hashtag MBTC, or nothing but the classics. So we're still dealing with things a little bit with COVID-19. Some of y'all have gotten a little crazy out there. Just want to remind everybody to stay inside and stay safe, wear those masks so that we can finally get through this thing. But Jay, things have been going out of control. We just had the 4th of July holiday, and I noticed that after Memorial Day, we had a large amount of cases rise, and I'm only wondering, depending on how smart people were with 4th of July, how bad it may get.
Right. I mean, with that, people were so anxious to be out and about, and pretty much almost had whole grown adults with that same mentality. People had the spring break, if I get corona, I just get corona. We were planning this, we've been sitting in the house and not really taking priority over it, prioritizing their health, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand part of it's cabin fever and everything like that, but you gotta understand, man, it's not worth it at the end of the day as far as sacrificing your health, because we're gonna just you laid up in the hospital. I mean, we talking 130,000 dead in 3.5 months. That's just insane.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Yeah. Hopefully y'all were smart. Hopefully you enjoyed. For those of you who are celebrating the 4th of July holiday, that you enjoyed it, and you're here with us and will be with us here for quite a long time. As we mentioned earlier this week on social media, we are with a new podcast host now with Red Circle. We thank Podbean for the opportunity and also for the platform for allowing the Vault to launch, but we have moved over to Red Circle Podcasting. Looking forward to a prosperous and long-standing relationship with them. I love everything they've done so far, but nothing's changed with the streaming platforms that we had. Everything is still the same. You can still catch the Vault wherever you've normally caught the Vault. We're just now on a new hosting platform on Red Circle. So today, Jay, we are delving into yet another classic album. We're going to go back to 1995 and right off of the banks of the James River, and to our boy D'Angelo, Michael Eugene Archer, his real name, to his debut studio album, Brown Sugar, released on July 3rd, 1995, 25 years ago, recorded between 1994 and 1995. At Battery Studios and RPM Studios in New York City, was mixed also at the Hit Factory and Pookie Lab in Sacramento. A runtime of 53 minutes and 17 seconds over 10 tracks. The label EMI, which had quite a few people on their label, included was also D'Angelo's label mate, AZ, who would put out Do or Die, which also came out in 1995. Ironically enough, the two of them would link up on a remix to Lady, which was one of the singles on here, a remix that was produced by DJ Premier and featured a verse by AZ, which also had a very memorable video, though, for those who were involved in it. Included Joy Gilliam, who used to be a part of the Dungeon, or still a part of the Dungeon family, Faith Evans, and then also people who didn't know Erykah Badu back then. That may have been the first time they saw her in a video. So
yeah, that was before, Badu that was about a year and a half, 2 years before her first album came out. So that was crazy.
It was crazy, yeah. And the producers on here, of course, D'Angelo, the executive producer, the legendary producer and also manager, Keter Massenberg. And Keter Massenberg, who also worked with A Tribe Called Quest. Keter Massenberg also worked with Erykah Badu and Joe, Profile, Chico DeBarge, the Bush Babies. So he was full into the R&B movement, and definitely he is the one who was credited with the term neo soul, who was looking for a movement to develop within a new soul movement, or the revival of soul music within the popular music genre. And this definitely was a pivotal album in that moment. Other producers as well are Ali Shaheed Muhammad from A Tribe Called Quest, Raphael Sadiq, who co-produced the track Lady and also collaborated with D'Angelo quite a bit in the later years, including on his album Voodoo. And a pivotal player in this album is also the legendary and prolific Bob Power. Bob Power, who worked in doing production, helping to write tracks, also played some instruments, famously the guitar on a couple of these tracks. And he has worked with people like The Roots, also with a Tribe Called Quest, the Jungle Brothers, Erykah Badu, De La Soul, India Ari. So he's very talented, a producer, engineer, composer, arranger, performer, and now also an educator. He now works as a professor at the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, located in New York City. 25 years ago for Brown Sugar J, and 10 tracks on this album. And for those who know, this was really the first time that we got to see D'Angelo inside of the public sphere as an artist, but he was involved in the music game for quite some time. A native of Richmond, Virginia, as we all know, compete in the amateur night in competition on the Apollo in 91, and then he moved to New York City afterwards. He had been involved with a few people, actually had a brief tenure as a member of a hip-hop group called Intelligent, Deadly, but Unique. So he was actually in a hip-hop group for some time. Then he signed a deal with EMI Music in 91 and got some attention by getting a demo tape out there, and then signed a recording contract and started writing songs for people. And one of the biggest successes that he had was in 1994. He was a co-writer and co-producer of the song that you know from by Black Men United, You Will Know, which was on the Jason Lyrics soundtrack. You know, we all know that song and remember that song from that movie, and then also the video with all the people. It seemed like almost everybody that you could think about, like every black male R&B singer that we all kind of grew up on was on that song.
Not even so much. I mean, yeah, that too, but like that whole the soundtrack for that joint was like, well, no, I can't say like just that soundtrack, but like just that, and between that and like the Panther soundtrack, I think the joint had like every relevant artist that was out at that time on it. Cause like, you remember like
Freedom.
It was a female.
Freedom
joint, and then the Points, which just like was just like
ridiculous
done,
track.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
the Points was a
like
like
between those three tracks, like you see, like everybody that was relevant at the time was
on those tracks.
Songs. So like, it just really takes you back to 95, man. Like,
good times, man. Good time. That's when soundtracks were popping, man. I know we definitely have to do Cards, Dominoes, Drinks, and Smoke on soundtracks in the way that they used to be and how they sort of faded from obscurity, man. Like, people aren't making music for movies anymore, you know? That back then, you used to make songs, and those songs used to be for those movies, and they would be fire songs, you know what I'm saying? And You Will Know was one of them, and he was a co-writer and co-producer of that song. We're talking about people like Brian McKnight, Usher, R. Kelly, Boyz II Men, Raphael Sadiq, Gerald Levert, Christopher Williams were all on You Will Know. At that point, he started to develop and emerge, and he started working on this debut album, which became Brown Sugar. Also, as a part of this album was also Angie Stone, who co-wrote the third track on here, Jones in My Bones, to Angie Stone, where they had a music relationship and also had a relationship that produced a child. They had a child together, Angie Stone and D'Angelo. One of the big things and the great things about this album is that a lot of the different development for this album came out of his love for music and being able to play many different instruments. Being able to play the piano, play different keyboards, and also being able to play guitar, bass guitar, and then working with a lot of different producers like Bob Power, working with Raphael Sadiq, Ali Shaheed Muhammad. He really had a sound that he was trying to develop with coming in on this. So, absolutely, you know, it really made an opportunity for there to be able to re-spark the R&B genre, because as Keter Massenberg sort of talked about, what he was trying to accomplish with neo soul is that he felt like R&B music was starting to die off a little bit. As R&B started to transition more into a fusion with hip hop, that, you know, some things that were present in R&B before and soul music before were starting to go to the background. So he wanted to bring some of that back, and bringing in artists like D'Angelo, Erykah Badu, also working with India Ari, also working with eventually artists like Jill Scott and Music, you started to see this genre, this subgenre of neo soul start to develop, where it was different than just the popular R&B, because it had something a little bit deeper than music. The way that the music was produced, the sound that the music had, the feel that it had, just made neo soul this phenomenon that developed into the late 90s, into the early 2000s.
I was saying, that's crazy to like say, even like when you think back to like the 90s, how we always, not nostalgic to the, not to where we think everything was perfect back then, but just like to think like back in the mid 90s where you feel certain things about the music were already falling off. Like, you know, like, I mean, yeah, you had your popular R&B, like your Jodeci, your R. Kelly, you know what I mean, like those type of artists. But then like to think even within that something was missing from it, and then for them to really push this neo soul sound, like it's just amazing to have that thought process back then, and like just to see the results it produced was just like wow, like you know what I'm saying, it really paid off to really push this subgenre of the music.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. And from this, you had a lot of different other genres start to come out and albums start to come out. You saw people like Maxwell start to come out, Erykah Badu, like we talked about earlier, Music Soul Child, Jill Scott, India Ari, Bilal, Floetry. I mean, right. You know, Vivian Green, Eric Benet, yeah, all people who were all considered neo soul artists. You know,
Heather Headley, like, you know what I mean? Like
Heather Headley, exactly. Like all these things, Dwelly, all these people that started, Rashawn Patterson. I could keep going naming on and on and on.
Yeah, it's pretty much everybody you see on BET's Midnight Love,
yes,
like that. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. Like I haven't seen a subgenre really take on something like that, probably even since New Jack Swing. You know, where people really grabbed onto a subgenre of a music and really took that niche and it took off almost to the point where I don't want to say it surpassed popular R&B, but neo soul fans are some of the most loyal fans out there of any other subgenre of music that I know. And Absolutely. This really kind of started it, you know? So we're going to go into Brown Sugar just about as far like what we thought about it initially when we first listened to the album and how we felt listening to it earlier on this week. Now, Jay, I've read a lot of different perspectives. There's been a lot of reviews and a lot of people who took a look back at Brown Sugar as it turned 25 this week and have seen the perspective. Some other podcasters have done some other reviews, particularly my boy 12 Cal. Shout out to 12 Cal, who did a review for Brown Sugar this week. It turned 25 and it was a great review. But I've seen a lot of different things come up about this, and I always sort of get to talk about how this is how that neo soul thing sort of started. But even back then, we didn't even know that's what we were listening to. We were just listening to something that it was just like, wow, we hadn't heard anything. But just sort of get your reaction of when you first started listening to this album, the tracks from this album, and then what you thought of, what you think about it in your time since then, and then listening to it this week, what you think now that it's been 25 years later.
Yeah. So like, you know, we saw in like 1995. I was in junior high school, like 9th grade, you know, and the joint Brown Sugar was blowing up everywhere. So, I mean, even though I didn't really have like a refined palette per se for R&B, like, you know, I knew it was something different that was already out there. So listening to that and then Lady and then Cruising, it just had like a different vibe to it than, you know, what was already out there and popular at the time. And you know what I'm saying, it didn't come across like corny, like open-toed sandals, like all this stuff like you would associate with somebody that is not really versed with it. But you know, it still had like a cool vibe to it. Everything worked. And him being a musician, the good vocals, just D'Angelo being an all-around talent. So I'm not gonna lie, I didn't buy the album back then because at that mind frame of 14, I really wasn't that hard on R&B, not hard, but not into it. But I was to it casually. Maybe like older folks had it, but going back and listen to it now, I mean, I think the whole album was a vibe. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
No, it was just like really consistent as far as like what D'Angelo had to offer. And then, you know, along with that, I mean, with the last track, you know what I mean, on there, like, you know, he was just like, it just showed he had something to offer for everybody on there. Like, you know,
yeah. I
mean, because I actually saw when the joint Higher. So like the joint Higher, like, you know, you had like a lot of older people vibing to that too, as far as like, you know, that gospel sound to it and giving praise to the Most High and everything like that. So altogether, I just feel it was a solid release. And, you know, it just like really consistently hit you with that vibe and that mission that D'Angelo was trying to put out with that. So I just thought it was job well done, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, and so I think I felt the same way. So when I came out, I was pretty much around the same time. I was still in junior high, and to me, when I listened to it, I didn't buy this album. My sister did, and I think I took it, and then I never gave it back to her because
typical brother-sister
relationship. And you know, so I just went ahead and I took the CD and I put it in. I remember, like, from seeing the video on the verse video that we saw was that video of Brown Sugar, him getting in the elevator with the old head. The old head's talking about some man. I ain't talking about the brown sugar you cook with, young blood. I'm talking about that good brown sugar, your woman. Yeah. And then he's in there and he's playing in the club. He sits down at the keyboard or the piano and starts playing. And, you know, you can see some smoke in the air. And, like, you see Ali Shaheed Muhammad sitting there, playing an instrument and stuff like that. He's in this club. And it's, like, you know, it really had this sort of, like, that feeling of, like, you being, like, in a jazz club. But it felt different because it wasn't traditional jazz like my father. It felt almost hip hop in a sense, you know?
Yeah, like more modernized.
More modernized. And so that was the first thing that drew me into D'Angelo. And then as the album started to came out, when I first heard it, that's when Cruisin' came out as a single. And this is a Cruisin', of course, is a remake of a song by Smokey Robinson, famously enough. And this was a remake. And really, this had been the first time I had heard Cruisin' at length from somebody else who decided to redo it. And I decided to get into the album, and I gave it a listen. Now, even back then, as you mentioned, my R&B palette wasn't as finely tuned, but I was into some R&B, and I loved all different kinds of music. And when I listened to it, I was like, okay, if I'm listening to any other R&B music, I can't listen to anything else for a while, because this joint is dope. Again, it just had the feeling to it. Like, you feel soul, right? Like, you see the different influences with D'Angelo. It was soul. You heard jazz. You heard R&B. You heard influences from Jimi Hendrix, from Prince, a little bit of Curtis Mayfield, influences from Miles Davis and from John Coltrane to Joshua Redman, and so many different other things sort of fusing themselves into it. And then D'Angelo looked hip-hop as fuck. Like, here was this dude with these cornrows and a leather jacket, you know what I'm saying, about as cool as you want to be, with a real chilled out vibe. And it was just like, damn, yo, this is really different than listening to Jodeci or listening to Christopher Williams or listening to Keith Sweat or any other R&B act you could think about from the late 80s into the early 90s. It was just like, literally like, oh, let's just sit down and have a drink with this. And I wasn't drinking back then, but it was like, sit down and chill. Like, just literally something that had you on chill. That's what the album brought to me.
You acting like listen to it on radio. I mean, even like my young 14-year-old mind back then, like, it was just like, you just like zone out, you know what I mean? Like,
zone out.
And then just like look at the clouds in the sky, just enjoy like the breeze coming through the car or something like that, you know, with the window down, like, or just enjoy the night air or whatever the case may be on your porch or whatever. It's just like I said, the whole thing was just a vibe, you know what I mean? Like, handle the business with this one.
Indeed. The thing that I like to point to with this and the time that has passed, this is the album that made me a D'Angelo fan. And when he was gone for a period of time, it was sort of like something was missing. And you sort of get filled in with stuff with Badu and with Maxwell and with different other, India Ari, who sort of came along in that time. But then when he came back, you sort of got that feeling again. And again, it was just sort of like this fusion of stuff that sort of came through. And it was like this feeling that you sort of get with D'Angelo's music that you don't get with all types of music. And that's the thing to me. And it was about the musicians that worked on this, the producers that worked on this, D'Angelo writing and being able to play so many different instruments. And when he did the demo to this, he did it and recorded the demo because he wanted EMI to let him produce and run the album himself. He did it on a 4-track recorder at his in his apartment or in his place at home. And he did everything as the demo to say, like, see, this is what I can do. This is the type of stuff I'm capable of being able to produce
on a 4-track recorder.
Can you let me run with this? And then when EMI did this, then they'd be able to give him the ability to go and run these studio sessions, to be able to write everything himself, to work with the producers he wanted to work with to create this sound. And even now, 25 years later, we look at this, and I listened to it again this week, and I haven't listened to it too much because, quite honestly, and I've said this, out of all the albums that D'Angelo's done, I think he's 3 for 3, by the way. I think that he's dropped 3 albums and he's had 3 classics. But to me, my favorite by far is Voodoo. And I think that, me personally, I feel a certain way about Voodoo because Voodoo, to me, not just musically, but spiritually, it touches me in a different type of way because I felt the transition and the journey he had went through from Brown Sugar to Voodoo. But nonetheless, he had to start somewhere. And this was really the start of a musical journey that really not only sparked the movement, but sparked his musical growth as an artist. And it really, to me, I haven't really seen a development of an R&B artist who delves in so many different instruments and also being able to write all of his songs himself, that it just kind of blew me away. It really did. And he collaborated and featured on a lot of different people's projects in between then. And after that time, you sort of set him as the gold standard. And really, he was up there. He's the one who helped to kick this thing off. But, listening to it now 25 years later, I'm listening, and it's really, like you said, still a vibe. I was listening to it in the car on the way to go run some errands, and it was almost like, damn, I got to stop this joint now, go inside the store. And,
Right.
I wanted to stay in the car and just keep listening to it. You know what I'm saying? Because it's an easy listen. It's only 53 minutes long, and it doesn't seem like it's that long. That's the tale of good music when you sort of get on the journey, and it's just like, damn, this joint over already? Like, how long was I sitting here?
Right. And
So,
and you still wanted more, you know what I mean? Like, matter of fact, like, I want, like, looking back on, I kind of think he like took from Nas's playbook in that sense, because Illmatic was on like 10 tracks. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And by the end of that joint, you pretty much felt like a musical fiend. Like you wanted more after that. Like,
Exactly.
Like, leave us like this. So
Yeah.
Props to D'Angelo for doing that too. You know what I'm saying? Because they always say like, leave the people wanting more.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. So, yeah, so I kind of want to go through to, just since it's such a slow album or such a short album, I kind of want to go through track by track to sort of get like some feedback, of course, of what we went through. Now, the title track is Brown Sugar, written by D'Angelo and Ali Shaheed Muhammad, produced by D'Angelo and Ali Shaheed Muhammad. D'Angelo did all the vocals, all the vocal arrangements, all the musical arrangements, and Ali Shaheed Muhammad did some of the drum programming that happened, but this was the lead single. And this is an album that is just so smooth. I mean, as soon as you hear that piano come in, that keyboard come in, it's like you can identify the song immediately. Do 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 do.
The bass line come in,
yeah. It's just like it's just really a smooth song. Now, for the longest while, I thought that this track he was talking about a woman that he nicknamed her Brown Sugar, right? And Kyle said this in this podcast too. A lot of us did, and it wasn't until later that we figured out that the song wasn't about a woman, it's about weed. The telltale signs were there the whole time, but at 13 and 14 years old, our minds couldn't necessarily know and conceive that he was talking about weed. He was talking, we thought he was talking about a woman. Why wouldn't you be talking about a woman, right?
Well, I gotta say, like the circle I was around back then, they kind of put me on back then around like,
okay.
They was like, he's talking about a blunt, right?
And it makes sense.
You know what I'm saying? Like he said, enjoying like I met her in Philly, and her name's Brown Sugar right there. First clue, Philly Blunts. And
Philly
he was
Blunts,
like,
yeah.
We've been making love constantly. That's why my eyes are shade blood burgundy.
Yep.
And then the other joint was like, she even got a little sister by the name of Chocolate Tie. Like,
skin of caramel with the cocoa eyes. Even got his sister by the name of Chocolate Tie. Yeah.
It's like I said, my circle put me on early to that. I'm like, okay. So I'm thinking like, this man, like this almost like Rick James of the '90s or something.
Like Mary Jane, exactly. It's like an ode to Mary Jane. Rick James was talking about weed and marijuana in his song Mary Jane. D'Angelo was doing the same thing 15, 20 years later with Brown Sugar.
and plus, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta remember about 1995, which people don't realize or maybe goes over people's heads. Like, that was a year for weed anthems. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, because you had like the Brown Sugar joint, you had How High, you had I Got Five on it.
I Got Five on it, yeah.
There's a couple other joints too. So like,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like, that was like, okay, it's like if you wanted to express a weed song, I'm saying 95 was the year to do it.
Yeah.
There was another group that put out a song about weed, which I cannot stand, but we're gonna leave that on another podcast. I'm just gonna not even go there. Anybody in my circle knows who I'm talking about. And I just cannot stand this group.
Nah, that was '96 that came out, man. That was the next year though. So I feel you. I know who you talking about. I'm not gonna say their name because I should mess with you though, because I know exactly who you talking about though. Hey, but I like that joint though. But anyway, that's for another podcast. But just like the bass line in that joint and then the vocal arrangements, you hear like the first time you hear somebody doing like the damn, like it's almost like him sort of taking off of what Ray Charles did, right? Doing all the vocal arrangements yourself, everything from the baritone parts to the tenor parts and everything to falsettos, and like he did all that was him. Like he did all those vocals were all him, which is crazy, right? And that bass line and that track just still kind of rides even to this day. Like it literally feels like you like got that lounge feel, like you sitting in a lounge and watching like a 5-piece band, a trio or something, just sitting there just sort of playing and just vibing out and jamming. So you got that feel from it as well. Then track number 2 is All Right, which was written by D'Angelo and produced by D'Angelo and Bob Power, which was a nice little switch up from there. And that beat, to me, it sounded a little bit more hip-hop more than anything else, because the drum programming on there sounded like you had that drum break in there, and it sounded more so like a hip-hop track. But, again, another great track as well. I know what you thought of, whether you thought that was cool or what you thought about All Right as the second track right after Brown Sugar.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like, you know what I'm saying, it was like a nice little transition, you know what I mean, like as far as that. And that was another thing I kind of noticed in D'Angelo's music, as far as like, it's kind of like a sampler's dream, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, soul sounds. It's like another joint in here, and like, I guess we get to it as far as like the track and how like I was listening to a joint, I'm like, yeah, I need to loop that joint, like, you know what I mean? Like, so I mean, yeah, so along with it being a vibe, I mean, it just goes back to my point. This joint has so much to offer. So
it does.
yeah, I feel all right. It was a nice little transition, and then after that, Jones and My Bonds, like, you know what I'm saying, like that one, I just like how that joint flowed, and like it just like. I'm sitting in the living room listening to it. I'm like, yeah, I feel like I need to go out for a drive right now with the, like you know, it's blazing hot outside right now. I just like, you know what I'm saying? Just like felt like it just felt like, you know what I'm saying, like I need to be like just cruising listening to this joint. So yeah, like
Jones and My Bones, written by D'Angelo and Angie Stone. So he did that one. They wrote that, and you know, it isn't like the most complex song out there, but the feel to it, especially that guitar again by Bob Power. That little doom 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 doom, and just the other instruments that are sort of involved in that. It was just like, yo, man, like this is just wow. Like again, the sound that you were hearing, like the instruments, like the thing that you were hearing and sound you were coming from instruments were things that you hadn't heard before. Guitar licks and chords that you hadn't heard before, right. And you got that like in Jones and My Bones. You go right to Me and Those Dreaming Eyes of Mine, which was another great track with a great remix to it, by the way, as well. Not on this album, but Eric Sermon did a remix to this. I was telling Jay about it before we got on the air. That was produced by Eric Sermon using the beat to I Used to Love Her by Common. And it's almost just like, yo, it's like a hip-hop dream that you could take something like this and put it to a hip-hop beat and it still go. You know, Me and Those Dreaming Eyes of Mine were a great track. And that guitar at the bridge, which was done by Bob Power, that doom 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 I was just like, oh my goodness, let's go. That's what I'm talking about.
Like you didn't have to be in the guitar playing, like really get that this man was doing his thing. Like that's how you know, like that's how you know somebody's like really bringing it. But
yeah, exactly. And then. You know, that was a really, really cool track though, man. And that was like one of the last singles that came out from this album, actually, was Me and Those Dreaming Eyes of Mine. Then the fifth track, Jay, is probably the most interesting track on there.
Yeah.
Shit, damn motherfucker. And it's a track about the air.
Yeah, I mean, aside from like the beat being smooth, it was brought just like the lyrics of it, like this man going through transition as far as like, you know what I'm saying, catching this chick cheating on him, up in the blick on him. Yeah. Next thing I know, I'm in handcuffs. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like it was something that took you through a journey. It's like he went through disbelief to denial to anger. It's like he sort of went through the 6 stages of grief, right? Or the 5 stages of grief that you kind of go through. He went through disbelief, then went through denial, then went through anger, then went through bargaining, and then finally went through acceptance that he just finally gonna have to kill these motherfuckers and he gonna have to go to jail for it, you know? Like, and another thing, yeah.
Clearly this man's Richmond side came out on this track, so
yeah,
I mean.
Exactly. You're right. That's exactly what came out. And I remember, Jay, and I know you remember this from the movie The Best Man, is that when Lance stepped into the bedroom to read about the passage that made him realize that Harper had sex with his wife so many years ago and never told him about it, that this was the song that was playing when he was reading it.
Damn sure was.
And as the angrier he's getting as he's reading it, you see the screen start to turn red. And it's exactly the same thoughts that D'Angelo probably had that he had. And he's like, damn, now I got to go out here and whoop this motherfucker's ass.
Yeah, he did.
I thought it was interesting by the movie producers and the film folks to use that track during the time when he finally was revealed that this is what the hell had happened so many years ago, that they chose this song.
Well played.
Another just smooth track. Those Wurlitzers and those organs, man. Those Hammond organs. I was reading in one of the articles that, you know, one of the good things about this album is that they allowed like Wurlitzer pianos and Fender Rhodes and Hammond organs, things that D'Angelo all wanted, those sounds, because he wanted that sound for his album. And he was sort of disappointed when the album was first finished because he wanted it to have a certain way. He wanted it to sound more organic. But when they took it to the studio and redid it, he said it sounded a little too smooth. So, but he was happy overall with the content. Speaking of smooth, that's the track after Shit Damn Motherfucker, which is a song written by D'Angelo and his brother, Luther Archer, produced again by Bob Power. And this, to me, is one of the sleeper tracks on here that if you pay attention to the singles, but this is one of the album cuts on here I think is one of the biggest bright spots. Because, again, it literally feels like you're listening to a mix of a contemporary jazz, but a hip-hop track, because the drums are hip-hop, like distinctly hip-hop. And the rest of it is sort of like a contemporary jazz record, from the guitars, the bass by Larry Grenadier, guitar by Malik Whitfield, drums by Gene Lake, and then D'Angelo on the piano and the keyboards. It's just like a bop. Like, you sort of just get it. And then the lyrics that he wrote to it and the hook is great. And the way that song sort of broke up from the first verse to the bridges all the way into the end of the song. And it's like, that's one of the longest running songs of the album. But it's just like, damn, yo, this is a nice track, bro. Like, y'all mash this thing up. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, those drums being hip hop and everything else sounded so jazz-like, so soulful.
True. I mean, I personally feel like it had like a little bit of a rougher sound to it, I guess, just like with the drums, but that's what kind of threw me off in the title, you know what I mean? But like, I mean, it's still everything worked. I mean, I guess like it says it's a smooth transition, like blending those, which either way worked. But I mean, yeah, definitely like a sleeper joint on this album. So,
and then after that is Cruising, and I'll be honest. When I first heard this track, and I also saw the video, which was a black and white, which featured in the beginning of it had Angie Martinez, and he was in the studio and he was there with the symphony, and the whole symphony was there. We're talking about strings and a whole symphony with timpani drums and everything. And this track goes on. And the first time I heard it on the radio, I loved it. And then actually, when I got this album, I think I played this track more than any other album or any other track on the album. And I'm going to say something that might be a bit sacrilegious, but bear with me. I actually like this version better than Smokey's.
Oh, wow.
That's just me. Now, I know I come from, so now I come from a certain era. I understand that some people may not necessarily agree with me. Some may see it as sacrilegious or blasphemous, but I actually like this version better than Smokey's. I do. And I don't know, maybe it's just my affinity for D'Angelo, but I do think, though, that the arrangements are, to me, is what I think I like better than Smokey's. Now, all props due to Smokey Robinson. He's one of the best performers, one of the best singer and songwriters of our time. Any of our generations, but these arrangements that really takes some talent to come up with being able to do arrangement. D'Angelo did musical arrangements, but then he also had, and the orchestra doing conducting and also arranging was Dunn Pearson, and also being another copyist was Eugene Bianco, and then had plenty of talented musicians that worked on this. That took me to another place also was Ray Charles. That kind of took me back to when you saw the movie Ray and he was recording Georgia on My Mind. He was in the studio with the choir and then had the whole symphony there as well with strings and everything. Just sort of just speaks to like the talent that this dude has, man. But just really a really laid back version of Cruising that Smokey did. And it was just really like about as good as a remake of a soul track as you could make.
Absolutely. I mean, like, just to put that much effort into, like, with orchestra and all that, like you were saying, man, it wasn't just like, he just did all that. I mean, he really like put that much effort into his music as far as like, because like I'm not an R&B person. I don't know if I would have thought like, to do all of those things, but especially for a remake, you know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, it's just like, damn, dude, you really got talent. You need more recognition than what you have or have gotten.
Yeah, exactly. And then after that is When We Get By, which is a nice little change up from there. But this was another great one too as well, with great live instrumentation by D'Angelo, written by him and produced by him. Had a trumpet in there, which is near the end of the track by Bob Basie Brockman, which is one of my favorite parts of the track. At the end of that, the trumpet that sort of comes in that you hear. And I love any type of live brass that you hear on a track, though, man. But this was another great track as well. Very, very cool, interesting, and different from the other tracks in the fact that the tempo and the pacing of it is a little bit different. The way he sung the track, the lyrics and everything is a little bit kind of more simplistic, but is a really, really cool track, though. This was mixed by Russell Elevado at Battery Studios and recorded at G-Spot at Battery Studios as well.
Yeah, and plus along with that, I mean, this is kind of what I was saying as far as like going back to like how I was saying about breaks. I mean, there was a nice little break beat at the end of that joint too. I just felt it was banging like like even like now doing this conversation, like I really need to sample that joint. I need to like I'm probably going to jump on the joint, you know what I'm saying, and cook, like try to figure out if I can come up with something else. And it wasn't even like, you know, just like one little time I heard it and like just like, you know what I'm saying, it's almost like, you know what I'm saying, like Jay was like speaking like, Jason, use this.
Use this. Indeed, man. But that's what good music does.
There's a reason you heard this today.
Yeah, but that's what good music does. It inspires you to create. It really does. And after that is Lady, and probably the most hip hop sounding track on here from those, you know, written by D'Angelo and Raphael Sadiq and produced by D'Angelo and Raphael Sadiq. And you really get that Raphael influence on it from the instrumentation, the guitar, which Raphael is on the guitar with that guitar. Oh my goodness. Raphael Sadiq is a bad dude, man. I said this to Damo when we did the Voodoo review earlier this year, that this dude, I don't think he's really gotten his flowers from the industry yet, man. The amount of talent that and the things that he's put forth, not just on the music that he's done, both with Tony Tone and solo, but then, you know, also with Lucy Pearl and then other artists that he's written for and produced for. Like, this track, Lady, man, is really, really crazy, though. And it's like, it's a quintessential, like, yo, you gonna let your girl know that you hers and you're mine, and, you know, ain't nobody else got this because I got this. And the track is just really hip-hop. It's that guitar, it's that bass that Raphael Sadiq plays as well, that piano that you sort of hear, which is played by Tim Christian. Then this track, man, the drum beat and everything is just real, and then you get that break that's in that comes right around there, and it's just like you hear that break of just that instrumental before he gets into that, and that bridge before you get into that last part of the hook, and then it's just like, man, this track rides. And then what rides almost just as much is the remix to this featuring AZ, you know, which was produced, which produced by Primo, by DJ Premier, featuring AZ with a verse by AZ, and they came out with a video for that one as well. Now, if I count, I think there was now, including Cruising, and there's 5 videos just for one album, including remixes. You know what I'm saying? And that's when people used to do videos a lot, because you could blow a budget on a video like, yo, let's do it. Because what were we doing? We was sitting at home watching Rap City, watching Video Vibrations, watching Video Soul, watching The Box, ordering music videos from The Box, paying like $2 for a video, which was crazy. Sometimes even $4 for a video, which is crazy, right? You know?
I mean, but if you could time it just right, you know what I'm saying? Like, if it was like a real popular song, like, you know, you didn't have to pay for it, because they was going to like play the joint like about 4 times in a row. So
exactly, like Crossroads. Like, I never had to pay for Crossroads because everybody was playing that joint. Everybody was ordering Crossroads.
Right, and then I did pay for it once because my mom let me do it. But like, I did like Natural Born Killers, Dr. Dre and Ice Cube.
Oh yeah,
it was just once I just had to hit it because that joint was just so vicious. To me,
vicious.
You know? And there was another joint that How High, like that joint. You know what I mean? Like Red of Meth.
Yeah, Red of
Go
Meth.
back to Weed Angle thing.
Yeah,
so.
Weed Angle, exactly. And then the last track on here is Higher, which is, like you said, it's not necessarily a gospel song, but it takes you to church, right? Everybody that I think I've listened to talking about this song takes you to church. And it's because you hear that organ and the way that the song sounds, it just like reminds you of one of those old church songs. And, you know, D'Angelo's father was a preacher. He grew up as a preacher. He's a preacher in the Richmond area. So he knew about church music because he used to play music in church. But this isn't necessarily a church song, but it's spiritual, and it takes you to church, you know, and it's almost like a different feel from everything else. Like you said, something else to offer. And then this is the last track that he ends this out on, where you get that feeling, like it almost feels like literally like you're in church, and this is the choir offering up a selection, and the offering plate's about to get passed. Right. You know what I'm saying? That's how I felt listening to this.
Yeah, matter of fact, like, it was a couple of reviews that I listened to on YouTube. Like, I went to the comment section, you hear people like, older people like around, I don't want to say old, like we decrepit or something like that, but like people around like, you know, late 30s, like around our age or whatever, like they're talking about like, you know, I asked my grandmother like about this album. She said this is her favorite track on the album. So like, what you wouldn't think about like them listening to a D'Angelo album even back then, but like, but grandmothers, they actually know this track Higher off the album. Like, one person said they had lost their grandma, but they was thinking about how they was saying like that's their favorite track, and apparently this person never listened to Higher until after she passed. He was like, wow, like
Yeah.
it's with the album. I can see why she loved the song
Why
so
she
much.
loved it.
So
Yeah.
it was just, it's like, damn, like, you know, he really just put like this. So this is the thing. This is the one that made me say like, well, he really put it down for everybody. Like
Yeah.
drawing off that church background and his father being a preacher and everything like that. So it was just, I guess, it was just right that he just put this on there too.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, it just, like you said, it takes you to church. By the time you're done and over with, it's like you done felt like you're, like the service is over with, and then you done closed out service, and it's almost like get ready to say the benediction, you know, and send everybody home, man. And you could see the influence this album had with some folks later on. This last track on this album reminds me a lot like the last track on Music Soul Child's I Just Want to Sing, which is called Be All Right, because it also sounds like a church track, like a gospel track. Like it sort of does that same thing. It takes you to church. And I said that to somebody when they were talking about Higher. I said, yeah, I said, you know, Music did a similar thing. I Just Want to Sing. He made his last track a sort of gospel type of track. And, you know, great way to be able to close out the album, man. But that's Higher, man. And that's 10 tracks. No filler, no skips for me, you know, just really great quality music. If I had to pick a track on here, which was my favorite, I guess my favorite track on here would definitely have to be Cruising, but right behind it would definitely be Smooth. That's it for me. Well, what about you? What say your favorite ones on here?
In no particular order. I mean, of course, all these joints. Right? I mean, I was definitely rocking with Lady.
Mm-hmm.
Even the original joint when I heard it, but then like I heard the joint that Primo did 96, like early 96 with AZ. I was like, damn, like he made it go that much harder. Then, well, along with that, I would say Cruising, and then just listen to now like Shit Damn Motherfucker, just because of the storytelling aspect of it. Like, you know, I just thought that was like real cool. And
yeah,
of course, Brown Sugar, you know what I mean? Like that's just gonna be up there. So
of course, yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's not nothing against the other tracks on there. And then of course, as a more recently Smooth because of that potential break beat I might use later on. I'm not sure, but
okay.
But yeah, like so I have to email you that one later too, decide on what I do with it. But yeah, so like those are the ones that really stand out to me as far as like tracks off this album.
Indeed, man. This is a album, like you said, reminds you a lot in the way that just like with Illmatic, just like with an album I did a couple of weeks ago, Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em. It 10 tracks. There's not really a whole lot of filler here, and you get a point where like this is an efficient album. There's no waste. You feel as though every single second that you've listened to has been a second well spent. You know, that's the way I sort of feel about that. So now we'll get into the whole test and to see whether or not, I mean, I think it's without a doubt, a certified classic, because to me, without this, you're not going to get a lot of different other Neo Soul classics you had later on, because if without this, I don't think Neo Soul would have been a thing. Like if Kedar hadn't worked with D'Angelo and D'Angelo hadn't created this sound, there would have been a lot of different people, not necessarily within his contemporaries like Badu and Jill Scott and India Ari, but I think the folks that came after, like the Dwellies and the Floetries and, you know, the Rashawn Pattersons and the Bilals, is that, you know, this kind of opened up the door to make it okay to make this kind of music. And then not only that, but man, this shit still goes 25 years later, bro. Like it's this is still a vibe 25 years, man. So I'm guessing you feel the same way, but what say you?
Classic, man, all classic through and through. Like, and I think like the thing that really kind of like solidifies as a classic, like, is I would say all together, like R&B. I don't want to say it fell off, but like just the fact, like, you know, it really hasn't gotten the same attention it did in the past, and the stuff that really has gotten attention, honestly, like really, I think we can both agree it's kind of lackluster.
Yeah, it is.
And then like, you know, the stuff that is a vibe or whatever that I would probably say came from like, you know, that was birthed from D'Angelo, like say like a Her, or I don't know if it's Her or HER or SZA, like one of them, like, you know, they really don't get much like radio play or get much attention, so it just like really like reigns true as far as like how dope the album is, especially like when you're looking for that vibe, you know, especially like, you know, us, you know, like those are like, I don't know if you want to say grown and sexy, but just like young adults, like, I mean, especially like some of us pushing 40s now, and like the journey is still a vibe, like, you know what I'm saying, like honestly, I probably wouldn't have, if this type of music had been like popular when I was in my early 20s, I probably wouldn't have been a homebody so much, like, you know, like the journey, because it kind of puts me like that song, like was it that group Coffee Brown, don't let the party stop, I think it's called. Like,
After Party, Coffee Brown, the After Party.
After Party, yes. Like, if them joints have been popular, like, you know, if there was like spots you can go chill to some type of music, you know what I'm saying? Like, me personally, I think I'd have probably been out and about more, like, you know, like hanging in certain spots or whatever, but man, I mean, just shows like good music is timeless. It just, I put up there in terms like joints you can rock with almost, 2.5 decades later, in some cases like 3 decades later, like that's up there with like Illmatic or 36 Chambers or The Chronic or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So
Indeed. And
classic
to
through
me,
and through.
yeah, and it seems like, yo, to be honest, man, he was on Miseducation, and I think the development, she had a talent always to sing, but I think the development of Neo Soul is kind of what took Miseducation from being what I think not just being a hip hop album, but really being a fusion of hip hop and something like Neo Soul, because people consider Miseducation a Neo Soul album, and for all reasons. Heck, there's a song on there with Lauren and D'Angelo, Nothing Even Matters, is a song that's on there. It was one of my favorite Neo Soul songs of all time, you know?
Yeah, man, that's a vibe all in itself.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, this is the one that started it all, man. So we have a lot to think about in the Neo Soul genre, which we're going to do Cards, Dominoes, Drinks, and Smoke later on, and talk about the Neo Soul genre and where it's gone, and, you know, what we miss about it the most nowadays, that it's not as visible in today's music climate, at least amongst the main airwaves and mainstream population and distribution that it was 15, 20 years ago. There we are, D'Angelo's Brown Sugar, released in 1995, 25 years ago. Again, please make sure you go and listen to this album if you have not already. To me, I think it's one of the best debut albums that a R&B artist or artist period could come out with, because it still rides even now today, 25 years later, D'Angelo's Brown Sugar. And that is going to wrap up yet another edition of The Vault. Please make sure you check us out on our new host, Red Circle. You can also download, stream, and subscribe to the Vault Classic Music Reviews on any one of our streaming platforms. You go to any one of our social media sites, you can get there on our bio. Our link tree has all of our streaming sources, including our host, Red Circle, and all the regular streaming sources. And then also all of our social media channels you can get to as well. You can get to us on Twitter at Vault Classic, on Instagram at Vault CMR Podcast. That's at Vault CMR Podcast. You can also search on Facebook and YouTube, The Vault Classic Music Reviews, and you can like the page and subscribe to us on YouTube. We always place our episode up on our YouTube channel for distribution, so you guys can check it out just in case you missed it. We always appreciate the support, and if you have a friend, tell a friend, and make sure you tell a friend to tell a friend. Always remember to keep your headphones on and your music loud, but not too loud. And as we close, we like to remind everyone to dream big, because dreams are the basis for creation. Always create, motivate, and elevate, because you were never destined or created to stay stationary in this life. And on that note, we say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening and coming into The Vault. Please subscribe and follow us on Facebook at IV Creative and Instagram at IVECRE8.